We will be. Good morning to all our attendees. We will be starting shortly. It is now 9:59, and we want to make sure that all who have registered have an opportunity to join us on this very important conversation with Councilwoman Amanda Farias, which we are really looking forward to hearing all she has to say, since she carries one of the most powerful chairmanship for a committee that really impacts all our businesses. So we will be starting shortly.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for asking.
So good to see you.
Great to see you.
We will be starting shortly. We have people signing in,
Awesome.
and then we can have this amazing conversation. So I appreciate you taking the time to join us this morning.
Yeah, of course. Thank you again for having me. Really appreciate it.
Of course, you're doing incredible work. So I'm really looking forward to hearing it, as are all your constituents on today.
Thanks.
Good morning to all our attendees. We will be starting our coffee conversation in exactly 2 minutes. Okay, we will officially start this meeting, our coffee and conversation. So I want to welcome all our attendees. Most specifically, I want to welcome our Councilwoman Amanda Farias to our coffee and conversation. These conversations have been very instrumental to sharing out information that City Council has been working on in general areas from housing to land use, to economic development, small businesses. And they've been very enlightening. This is more about getting to know you, Councilwoman, getting to know you carry one of the more powerful committees for us, economic development, as I need not tell you the importance that it is for the Bronx, as all focus is on us. People have realized after all these years how important the Bronx is. And we love it. We're all about economic development, and we're really looking forward to having a very proactive conversation. Just so everybody understands where we're going, I will introduce our Councilwoman Farias with her bio, which is extremely impressive. At which point I will turn it over to you, Councilwoman. We will be receiving questions along the way. We encourage everyone to ask questions. This is really about an interactive conversation. We also want to make sure that you know that this videotape and this conversation will be available on our YouTube channels and to all attendees, and of course to your office for your constituents. So officially on behalf of the Bronx Chamber, I truly want to thank you, and I want to welcome all of our participants. Unfortunately today, Michael Brady was supposed to join us and he is under the weather. It seems we have a lot of that going around lately, which is disheartening. We really thought we were past that, but we'll leave that alone. And questions already popping up. I love it. So let me introduce Councilwoman Amanda Farias and read a little bit more about you for those who may not be familiar with your great work. Amanda Farias is the council member for District 18, representing neighborhoods Castle Hill, Classen Point, Harding Park, Parkchester, Unionport, Shore Haven, and Soundview. Councilwoman Amanda Farias is the chair of the Committee on Economic Development and the co-chair of the Women's Caucus. She is the first woman, Bronxite and Latina to serve as the chair of the Committee on Economic Development. As the chair, she has hosted the city's first legislative hearings on the emerging adult use cannabis industry, which should be a very good conversation, the New York City ferry system, and has worked to ensure the economic recovery is focused on equity and prioritizes our Black and Brown communities. Under our councilwoman's leadership as co-chair of the Women's Caucus in the first Women Majority Council, several comprehensive packages have been passed addressing issues of women's health and wellness, including the support survivors package, universal child care package, and the groundbreaking New York City Abortions Rights Act. She continues to work to create a holistic improvements of qualities to the life of women, trans women, and gender non-conforming people across the city. Amanda is a lifelong Bronxite, born and raised in Soundview, as a second-generation Afro-Latina of Puerto Rican and Dominican descent. Powerful combination. She is a proud product of our local schools and community institutions. That is a very impressive, I was gonna say cannabis, bio. Could you see where my mind is at? Okay, so welcome, Councilwoman. Some greetings, and I guess I'm really literally going to kick it off. You have so much on your plate, all of it really with a huge impact on our borough, the communities in which you serve, and we are super excited to hear from you. Remember, all questions can be put into the Q&A. Whatever we may not be able to get to, of course, we will follow up with all our participants. Thank you, good morning, and welcome to Coffees and Conversation. I have my coffee and I will turn the table over
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that wonderful welcoming and for reading a bit about me. Good morning and good morning, everyone on the call. I'm, as mentioned, Councilmember Amanda Farias. I get to represent the 18th Council District, which includes Castle Hill, Classic Point, Hardy Park, Soundview, Parkchester, and Unionport. And soon to be Westchester Square after this electoral cycle. I'm excited to be here today with all of you. And I really, really just want to say again, thank you to the Bronx Chamber of Commerce and Lisa Soren for inviting me and having me here for this coffee and conversation. In the council, as mentioned, I serve as the chair of the Committee on Economic Development and as co-chair of the Women's Caucus. In my role as chair, I provide oversight over the programs and initiatives carried out by the New York City Economic Development Corporation, better known as NYCEDC, as well as NYC & Co., which is the official tourism marketing organization for New York City. I also get to oversee the Mayor's Office of Talent and Workforce Development and the Mayor's Office of Food Policy. So quite a bit under my umbrella with the chair position of the Committee on Economic Development. I am the first woman to chair this committee, as well as the first Latina or Latino period. And it's really been great to bring my union background and my worker-centered perspective into a space that has historically been focused on revenue over workers. Since the moment I was appointed to this role, I have continued to push toward the idea of equitable recovery and have worked closely with the mayor to ensure the Bronx is a priority towards that recovery. Additionally, I have been able to make investments out of my own local budget, the Greater City Council budget as a member of the budget negotiation team. And through that, I've advocated for bigger projects from the mayor and the state and federal partners. For example, some of you might be really familiar. My district got our first business improvement district this year. From my local budget, I was able to support their creation with an allocation of $50,000, as well as being able to support some supplemental groups around this vicinity to support the other commercial corridors and small businesses, like Yemeni American Merchant Association, South Bronx Overall Economic Development Corporation. And I worked to create a pilot with Brooklyn Legal Services to do some legal services for our local small businesses in the area. In coordination with the New York City Department of Transportation, Council District 18 also has a new addition to one of our busiest commercial corridors, Morrison Plaza. To see $8.8 million invested in the Soundview area was incredible and represents a neighborhood and local economy that was built by and for Bronxites, and that's really important. The shops at Bruckner are also starting to fill up again with new addition of a Five Below and an upcoming Target and Aldi's. I've been hitting up everyone I know, every franchise or lobbyist I know who represents helpful businesses like Target to convince them to not only come check out the area, but also try to see how we can bring local jobs here first. In the council, I was also able to make and bring historic wins for equitable and inclusive economic and workforce development. We funded the Pride at Work program, which is a brand new initiative that myself and a few other council members prioritized with $501,000 to bolster workforce development across a wide range of career paths, including civil service jobs and pre-apprenticeship models. And the initiative will also help folks prepare for the civil service exams themselves. I also am continually advocating for more bridge programs, which are a key tool to holistic and long-lasting job training as it pairs academic skills contextualized with sector-specific content. These programs really allow for people to not only learn new skills in a holistic way, but let those who are recentering the workforce or maybe trying to switch sectors and come in with new tools for success. The council, in partnership with the mayor, was also able to support a record 100,000 summer job opportunities annually for young people ages 14 to 24, with 90,000 of those opportunities stemming from the Summer Youth Employment Program and 10,000 opportunities coming from other citywide programs. So let us know if you want to be an SYEP partner. I had 2 this summer and we plan to do it again. Another win for the Bronx was getting the Hunts Point produce market selected as the recipient of the $110 million US DOT infra grant to help fund significant redevelopment of the produce market, protect jobs, and improve communities' air quality. I look forward to seeing these improvements to the market's infrastructure and the overall quality of life for the workers there and the surrounding community. And I'm eager to further support the work there with Mayor Eric Adams, the NYC and our city agencies to see that this grant actually gets to improve the lives of Bronxites for years to come. In my other hat, leading as the co-chair of the largest women's caucus to date is very meaningful to me, especially since I used to be the director of the caucus when I worked in the council before. So really a full circle moment. Every issue is a women's issue, but economic and workforce development are especially important to achieving true racial and gender equality. Our essential workforce became apparent during the COVID-19 pandemic. During that time, the New York Times reported that 1 in 3 jobs held by women were designated as essential. Women are overwhelmingly serving in essential positions, yet our essential needs are not often met. That's why I fought for many amendments to Intro 134A, a law that requires all companies looking to hire New Yorkers to include a salary range in their job description. I will also continue to advocate for equal pay for women across the city. On average, we see that women only make about 86 cents for every dollar made by their white male counterparts in New York State. And that disparity is even wider for Black and Latinx women. During a year when women faced attacks against our bodily autonomy at the federal level, the council effectively steered city policies against the dangerous precedent set by the Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade. We passed the New York City Abortions Rights Act, 12 pieces of legislation that safeguard and increase access to abortion and reproductive health care for anyone in need, including those traveling from out of state. This included a law that requires city-run health clinics to provide free abortion medication, and we made sure to invest $1 million to support our abortion care providers, the largest commitment of any municipality to fund abortion care and healthcare access by any city in the United States. The council also worked to address the high rates of maternal mortality that disproportionately harm Black women and people of color. We passed an 11-bill legislative package to address these persistent disparities in maternal health, including establishing a no-cost doula training. The racial disparities in healthcare have long existed, yet it took a women majority legislature to finally confront them as a priority. In my role as council member and co-chair of the Women's Caucus, it's not only focusing on women's issues, we're tackling long-standing issues by investing in holistic public safety initiatives. I invested $100,000 in community safety for housing support, youth programs to create more opportunities, and more that will work in coordination with the local precincts to help reduce crime long and short term, while strengthening our communities at the same time. Part of that was allocating $25,000 to Jacoby Medical Center Stand Up to Violence team. SUV has already reduced gun violence in the 43rd precinct by 59%. This program is a success only because of how integrated it is and ingrained in our SVU leaders that are ingrained in our community. The work that SUV is doing does make a difference greatly. And I know that together we'll continue to bring down the rates of gun violence in our community, especially for our young people, and increase safety locally throughout our commercial corridors and our neighborhoods. And I think with that, I'll stop because I've said a lot. And I'd like to see if there's any questions or comments and keep the dialogue going.
Well, all I can say is, wow. That is incredible. I'm not sure how many hours you have in your day, but everything you listed has been a priority for all our businesses. So first I'll say congratulations. And again, wow. I don't know where to start. I have tons of questions, and I have 3 pages of questions, more for clarity, because it's incredible all the work that you've accomplished in such a short time. But I see we have a question, so I'll start on this side. It says, what strategies, opportunities, and resources are available to keep young people and young professionals in particular engaged in the borough and its communities? How do we reduce brain drain and talent migration? That's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a great question. I think I look at this in a couple of different facets, right? I think looking at opportunities like summer youth employment, where we're starting super young, really teaching both the soft skills and the hard skills in a workplace, are already putting a lot of tools in young people's back pockets. And then I think a lot more has to be invested in our CUNY system. We do end up losing a lot of young people by trying to attain a higher degree, whether that's an associate's or a bachelor's, and making sure those job opportunities and those fellowships and internships are invested in, get directly to them so we can keep them both in the workforce, but also in our schools. And then really for me, career and technical education investments are critical. I'm an academic and my brain works academically, like ask me to write a 40-page paper. And I'm like, yes, I will do that for you in 2 days. Like that sounds exciting. But my brother, for example, is a math, science, work with his hands person. He's not someone that gets excited or wants to write a paper. And so really what I've been trying to champion as much as I could in conjunction with Chair Joseph of the Education Committee is pushing more investments into our career and technical education schools and ensuring that they are directly connected to internships where we can then transfer those skills directly into employment. And so CTE schools are really, really important because they're teaching apprenticeship models. They're actually moving with where the trends are in technology. You know, you can go to Bronx Community College from Alfred E. Smith High School in the South Bronx and understand fully that cars are no longer just about changing oil and getting dirty, they are computers. And so that's really important to make sure we're meeting the needs of students and their interests, while also investing in their professional development. And hopefully what we're seeing now with this equitable recovery and reinvestments into large sectors that we're seeing massive growth in across the US, you know, we're able to make those connections straight to keeping people here. And I think keeping people here, we can go on a long tangent about we need more affordable housing and housing stock, period, right? We need really robust commercial corridors. We need childcare access. We need older adult care that can help give people more flexibility. And don't get me started on fixing the MTA to give more people time to get back home and maybe patronize in our communities. So it's definitely a lot happening at the same time, but I do think there are many of us, including myself, that are prioritizing these issues to make sure we can holistically approach our communities.
That's an incredible, and just for the purposes of keeping transparency, I do sit on the MTA board, so we can definitely have a conversation at any time with a lot of changes. But you're right, I think, and I'll start on that just to continue. Tech schools, career, there used to be a time where you had the Samuel Gompers and all these schools that really was a combination of robotics, technology, and plumbers, electricians, and and now you look at, and I'm all about education, right? I'm a huge advocate of education. My family are all in education. But I also believe that college is not, to your point, the only solution, right? Because we are losing the hands-on type of services. And when you mention car repairs, there's a lot of changes, one being the rezoning of Jerome and all those other areas where there's a high volume of auto repair shops. Very old school, park your cars on the sidewalk, change the tires. But I think that something like this, understanding and doing the outreach for the importance of changes within something like the auto body industry that has become technology, all about technology, is super important. So where we can assist, that's really a priority.
Sure. And
Because that's our future.
Yeah, and I also think we as like large workforce even need to consider, what does the future of work look like and how do people actually work? I don't believe that every job should be hybrid or every job should be remote, but there are some industries that I think we've learned can adapt and have adapted well and have seen production skyrocket during times of being fully remote, and others where we've seen we really need that human interaction and people on the ground, right? I could never see government being remote. That's just not realistic, or healthcare, right? But there are spaces where we could maybe keep talent, maybe reduce that brain drain or that exhaustion of if we just consider like what does the future of work look like and how do we readapt to have a better work-life balance.
That's very true. And that seems to be a major conversation. I'm very old school, and I am learning through my staff and all the talented people that surround the importance of that work-life balance, right? I think mentally, older generations were just taught work until you drop, right? And that's not always the solution.
Yeah.
We have another question here that says, are there any specific infrastructural priorities for the district that are currently working on or interested in, i.e. public transportation, infrastructure, electrical vehicles, parks, recreational space?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on a little bit of all of that. With the way this job works, we kind of have to be doing multiple things at the same time. So in terms of EV infrastructure, I've actually been working with a bunch of independent for-hire vehicle drivers, where we're working to prioritize how do we get a just transition for drivers in either providing or having access to electric vehicles. As we know, they're pretty costly and not everyone could just make that switch, but also looking at community and saying, how do we ensure that when we have our local drivers that have these electric vehicles, that they can actually come home and be able to charge? So I am trying to work as hard as I can to kind of look at different ways that the mayor's prioritizing this and how our community can adapt. In terms of transportation infrastructure or just general infrastructure ideas, I have been working on a large scale scope of figuring out how to add to the housing stock and develop in community while keeping the fabric of District 18 still here, making sure that the families that we have that are doubled up and tripled up actually have an opportunity to rent or own a home in the community. And so that is going to be it's a longer term goal for me, but really being able to look at our zonings and the current land use that we have, and readapting that to maybe add some more housing or some different development in the community. We have a bunch of projects, capital projects coming up in terms of parks. Soundview Park should be receiving a recreation center really soon. It's a priority for me to see that project through.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I mean, it's been a long time coming already. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that I am kind of chiseling away at to make sure that if there's budgetary gaps, I can fill them, or if it just needs some like fire under people's feet to get it moving. But every single budget, I'm trying to strategically and deliberately use the capital dollars that I have and the discretionary dollars that I have. So making sure, supporting things like the ferry landing is improvement, remodeling or reconfiguring streets to ensure that we have protected bike lanes and bike lanes, but also still have access to parking. As we know, we're a commuter district, we're intergenerational in a household. Most of us will always need a car living in a transit desert, but we do want to make sure we're making the community multimodal and giving folks that can utilize other forms of transit that access to reduce as many cars on the road as we possibly can, and just really making sure that we are having best use of our busways. It's not always best to go east to west in the Bronx on a bus, but if we can make our busways more efficient in our borough, it could be the best transit that we could use. So I have a bunch of different both legislative priorities, like I have a fix the MTA 6-minute reso calling on Kathy Hochul to invest money into the MTA and into the infrastructure that we need real investments into, all the way to for-hire vehicle measures, and trying to utilize this capital budget every cycle in the best way by supporting our local infrastructure, like our streets and our parks and our schools and our libraries.
I totally, our conversations can lead to a half day. So I'm trying to like minimize because you've hit on so many points that are so important. I'll hit on one thing that I know. One is I totally agree with you with the investment on MTA, not just because I'm part of the board, but also, with the development and the changes within the bus route over the course of the last year has shown to be very efficient. But then those that have not been touched have been slowed and overcrowded. And that was a strong conversation that took place yesterday. And it's one that I continue and with partnerships just like yours and our other elected officials to really bring that communication forward. The need that if it's working on one side of the Bronx, we need to then refocus on the other ones. And you mentioned something about the ferry, and we have some more questions, which I'll turn to. There has been, the ferry at Soundview is probably one of the busiest.
Yes.
The communication has always been the concern about the parking issues to get to there. But then there's the ferry and Throgs Neck that has not been doing so well. Is it a priority for City Council yourself to see how that can change? Do you find that it may be not in the right location? What's your thought on what's happening? And I know this is totally off subject and questions are popping up, but I'm curious, since there has been so much conversation about that ferry point and then the rumors around the interest in putting a casino within that area and how the ferry would play a role in that.
Sure. So first, I'll just start with that latter part. Haven't heard anything about a casino, so rumors are just what they are. Rumors.
Agreed.
So we'll just ignore that even exists until we really see anything. I think it doesn't really deserve any attention. The community's ferry, I would want to see be more robust and be more utilized there. I do think that the two Bronx ferry stops are really important to the communities there themselves, that at least giving access to folks traveling down the east side of Manhattan and being able to connect to Brooklyn, to Queens and other areas. I think we should, the NYC EDC does a ferry survey every year. They actually just wrapped up a survey. I'm happy to look into what were some of the responses there in Ferry Point to see if people stated, the shuttle bus is inefficient or they need more additional timing. The Soundview Ferry, as you mentioned, is very, very busy.
It is.
I think we've gotten better at addressing the parking when Ferry Point opened up, because Ferry Point has a parking lot where you can leave your car there all day and a shuttle that brings you straight to the ferry. And we did have a lot of other folks that were traveling from different neighborhoods to come into Soundview to utilize the ferry, which is great, right? We want people to have more access. But I do think that for us to make sure that it is being best used and that it's efficient, the survey is really important. So if anyone rides the ferry and hasn't filled out a survey, please do. They're usually stationed somewhere on the seating or on a poster in the ferry itself, or you can go on the EDC's website and get it. But also being able to make that stop really robust is going to be critical in the Bronx being able to have more access. I don't necessarily know if we're doing a great job, we as a city are doing a great job at highlighting what it means to take it to Ferry Point and what you have access to and how you could shop local, or even the Soundview stop itself. But it costs a lot of money to build the ferry landings. And so the stop will stay there for as long as we can keep it there. But I think that for me personally, I would love to see an expansion of ferry landings. Right now the EDC is going through a new ferry contract. And so we can't really look at expansion just yet because we need to get through if we're renewing a contract or we're going to have a new provider. It's great that the city actually owns every single boat in its fleet. So we own the entire fleet. So contract wise, it's just who's going to be the provider. But the city actually is self-managing its fleet, which is great. And we've done some adjustments on cost to offset some of the costs that we have as a city and as the EDC. And so we still have the local commuter package where people can pay $275, but we also have a larger, one stop or one ride, or a tourist one ride of $4. And I'm actually working on, which I'm hoping to bring more people onto the ferry. I should be in the next couple of weeks be voting on a bill that I introduced into the city council to give a subsidized fare to students to ride the ferry. So right now, students will have to either pay a full fare or not utilize the ferry at all to get to school. We're in the final stages of approving and being able to vote at a stated meeting on a bill to allow students onto the ferry. So hopefully, with all of this, all of these different measures, we'll get to bring more people on, and we'll get to see some more robust ridership. I went to Preston High School, so being able to have a ferry ride from Southview to Thrive
Heaven.
would have been super helpful versus the hour and 40-minute ride, up the 39 and down the 40 or the 42 all the way to each last stop.
I totally agree with you. And I'm glad, because when we're talking about transportation deserts or the need to reduce car traffic, and you have people on both sides, right, on how they feel about that. The ferry, I think, is really probably one of the more common sense ways to do it. And it's actually a lot of fun. Okay, the questions are building up here, so I will stop sticking my 2 cents in, because you and I will definitely have to have another conversation. Question, how can we redirect, I'm assuming this is funding that are ripping our families, redirect findings that are ripping our families apart through the child welfare and juvenile justice system. We need to invest in those dollars in schools, after-school programs, and community service so that our children can be given the opportunity to thrive. I'm assuming it's more about what type of investments in school to try to keep kids in school and make it a more dynamic environment.
Sure. I mean,
that also impacts, and I will put my 2 cents in there and say that while STEM is super important, it's something, to your point before, that your brother is fabulous on. Some of the basics have also been lost in the proper writing, communications, and so on. So I can see the concern about this question.
Yeah, I mean, this is a more convoluted question in terms of funding, right? Funding doesn't actually work in a way where you can just take one pot of funds and just move it to another pot of funds in the city. We have a $101 billion budget, and that's with a B. And so it's not as easy as just, going from your checking to your savings account. That's just not how it works in local government. There's a lot of different reasons to why there are some divisions that have to pay for administrative costs and teachers and anyone who's a union member and has to have their fringe benefits and union contracts paid for, medical. There's a lot of different things. What I will say to this is every city council member has different ways that they can utilize their budget. Both capital and discretionary. So discretionary budget is programmatic budget. So that is, yes, adding a music class or an art class to the school. It's funding after school programs or, the delayed programs after the school day. So parents have an opportunity to have more time to pick up their students. It's also bringing in restorative justice programs into schools. And so there's a plethora of ways that individual members can directly impact the local schools within their district. Many of us share school districts, as I'm sure we all know on this call. Not a single district line overlaps directly. So congressional lines and council lines and assembly lines and school district lines all look very different. But what I would say to you, Jeanette, whether you're in my district or in another district, reach out to your member and find out where the percentages of dollars are going and how we can use you as an asset to redirect dollars to maybe the most schools in need. These things do have to happen simultaneously. I understand a lot of things are happening. They have to happen in parallel to reduce the school to prison pipeline. Doing, for example, the 25K I mentioned earlier into SUV, they're working directly in our NYCHAs with young people, pulling them out, but also with people already in the system. I have put in different types of funding that like Good Shepherd Services runs out of my high school. They're working directly with high school students on restorative justice programming. And there's a lot of different programs like that. But what I've done is I meet with principals and I find out their direct need. I find out what's been working for a really long time and maybe what isn't. If they have a great relationship with their after-school provider or they're missing a program. And that's how I've been able to supplement my funding to support the schools. On a larger scale, the mayor's budget is really the largest budget when it comes to schools, and the council can help decide where some of that money goes, but the mayor dictates where a lot of the money with the chancellor goes and how it's disseminated. And so I'm always happy if you want to reach out offline to see what some of the council priorities are, or better explain the preliminary budget so you can see where there are cuts and where there are investments, either in the schools or locally. It is not something that's always like simple for everyone to take in. It's not simple for me to take in most of the time, but I'm happy to like demystify any of these questions that you might have on offline if you'd like. So I'll, at the end of this, I'll drop my my email and contact information in the chat.
And for those listening, her office is extremely responsive. We have a dual question it says, thank you for your support of the cultural community. The council has been a true leader during challenging times. How do you see the future of this sector in the coming budget? And I'll add, I would also take a look at the capital budget process. It can take up to 10 years to get a project completed.
Sure. So this is one of the capital process has been one of the largest issues. I think generally as a council, we have tried to directly flag and try to get a resolve for. The mayor and the deputy mayor have made it a priority in looking at the capital process and trying to eliminate any of the hiccups in the way or any of the bumps in the road that prevent direct payment or a shortening of a lengthy multi-phase process. And so that's still underway and still hasn't been determined on how they're going to streamline the capital budget process, but it has been a priority last budget and this budget for the council and the mayor. In terms of the cultural community, I mean, it's a similar answer in that it's a priority. We want to keep our culturals in our communities. We want to make sure they receive the funding that they ask for and that they deserve to keep their doors open and serve our community members. Last year during the budget negotiation that I was a part of, we prioritized along with the many of other priorities, the cultural community's priority of being fully funded with the ask that was made of 50 million. And we got as close as we possibly could to it. And I think we met it, if not, we met at 40 million. And that's citywide, right? Just so everyone knows, it's not just for the Bronx, it's a citywide ask. But I'm hoping to see that we can continue either keeping folks at the budget that they have and finding areas where we can add some enhancements and maybe give a little bit additional funding. This budget, as we are seeing it roll out, seems to be, it seems like it's going to be a more and more difficult process this year due to lots of different things around where funding is being lost or not being renewed from the federal government because we are beyond post-pandemic at this point. But for me, I want to say most of my colleagues, if not all, the culturals and the arts community is definitely a priority this budget.
And kudos to that. So I'm going to shift over. There's some more questions, and please understand for those who are putting the questions, do not stop. We will try to get to all of them So I'm going to redirect you for a second. You mentioned about your Castle Hill Business Improvement District. Congratulations. I was in those conversations back in the day. That was a lengthy process for something that was so desperately needed for your corridors, because transportation is great there. Your small mom and pops are fantastic. So talk to me a little bit about when you talk about a business improvement district, and there's so many other corridors across the city, and this has been a chamber initiative and conversation for as long as I've been here and before, about the impact the business improvement districts have on our community and the importance. Records show that during COVID, those with the business improvement district vied much better than those that did not. So your take on business improvement districts, and as economic development chair, how do we work with local businesses across the Bronx about showcasing, one, business improvement districts, and two, the importance of having leadership or merchant associations within those corridors? That has been a really difficult conversation, because we have 11 business improvement districts, but 70 commercial corridors across our borough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always in support of finding ways to get people more organized, especially where we have them condensed in such a small area, right? So for me, when I came into this position and was notified that from the Westchester Square bid, who was helping out build out our Castle Hill bid, that they were wrapping up and in final phases and, needed XYZ, like it was an automatic yes. Like, one, who wouldn't want to fully support and see through a process that had taken at that point, I think, almost 5 years to come to fruition? And two, like what a committed group of people that through a pandemic, without being organized in this group, still one, we're committed to the pathway of being, creating the bid, but also really helped one another out through the pandemic. And so to me, it was a no-brainer. I immediately just tried to connect with the agencies and the people that I knew there and said, how do we expedite this and how do I get it through? And so we did within my first, I think, 3 months in office. And it was just really exciting to see that a community that I was born and raised in, at least in the government space I've been around in for half that time, people were talking about it potentially coming and it now being here. So for me, especially looking at the Bronx as a whole, when you're looking from community up to small business, the more organized and the more coalitions that could be built, especially in this type of structure where businesses are investing in themselves and investing in the local neighbors that are investing in their business every single day. We need more of them. District 18 itself, doesn't have many civic associations, doesn't have many HOAs, doesn't have any Democratic clubs or Republican clubs or, civics. And so we need as many opportunities as we can where people are coalescing, where people are building together. And bids are definitely just one of those that can bring a commercial corridor more life. And honestly, like the biggest compliment that I think I was able to see this winter season were so many people excited to just see the lights on Castle Hill Avenue, right? And to a lot of my neighbors, that to them was a direct investment in their community from their local business. So anytime people were like, thank you for doing that, I was like, no, that's the bid. Yes, it was through my budget, but the bid put their heads together and picked out the signage and made sure to get it up this season, even though they haven't, started yet, because they understand that in order for their businesses to continue to thrive, they need to invest in the local community. And so I think, any opportunities we have to support a bid or merchant associations is really critical. I do understand that organizing people, I come from a body of many people in government, it's hard to organize people, right? Everyone has their own intentions or levels of affordability that they would want to invest into something like this. But the more we can be putting people together to support the commercial corridors, to support our small business spaces, is really the only way our communities are going to be able to thrive. So really in support of the chambers, the merchant association, the bids that we have throughout the city, and particularly this borough. And I think you asked me one more question that I'm forgetting.
I think it's more about the education and getting it out there, right?
Yeah. So I think, one of the ways I've been trying to tackle this myself, and I do think the city needs to do a better job, is, I myself walked with DCWP Commissioner Mayuga down Castle Hill Avenue and a couple of the other local streets with businesses, gave out information that we know is a Google search away, but the average person that is dealing with, their own bank accounts, opening and closing, staff, all of these things is not necessarily wondering, let me Google this question I have, or let me see if this service is available to me. There are plenty of services. There's plenty of free services out in the city for small businesses, and we really just have to get it to them. And so, having DCWP go out as often as we can is really important. Second to that, I've particularly been trying to work with New York City and Co. because they have a local highlight that they do. They want to bring people to go local and to shop in different communities, commercial corridors, and to look up small businesses that are maybe MBE or MWBE or veteran owned. And they are working really closely with local commercial corridors and bids and merchant associations and chambers to find the businesses that they can highlight, or the bid that they can highlight, or the corridor that they can highlight, to show communities that they're on the map, but also to bring more people there.
Totally agree. And one of the other things, again, a side note, is I think also, as in your committee, maybe looking at some of the laws and bills that are coming down that can impact small businesses. One of the conversations, and we won't go deep into this because I think this is a much larger conversation, is, in trying to protect some of the businesses, commercial corridors, employees, there's been challenging initiatives that impact small businesses long-term, right? And post-COVID, I think that's just a bigger conversation. And I know one that's coming down the pipes is the Department of Sanitation changes and rules, which we will hold another conversation on, and the impact of zoning our businesses here in the Bronx, which I had a long conversation regarding this, because a lot of the rules, and I put this in all my elected officials, that are made for the city are based on Manhattan businesses and the overall business platform for Manhattan, and trickles down to the Bronx. And my argument is the Bronx is not Manhattan. And I am grateful that we have elected officials like yourself that get that. There was a question about the NFT for the chamber. You can contact sbrn@bronxchamber.org, and we will answer that, because we're entering many conversations on various industries, which brings me to an interesting one that is the talk of the city, the cannabis industry. There was I guess a successful one in Manhattan. There's one about to open in Harlem. I understand that the third one somewhere within the Manhattan area. The Bronx will or should be seeing some soon. In your conversations with your colleagues, the city, the businesses, can you talk a little bit about what you're looking at, the goal of how you see these institutions opening? I can put my 2 cents, but I will not. We will leave this more of a generic conversation. It was long in coming, and how do we get businesses, residents, and others to understand this is a business, but I also understand there's many commercial-minded individuals who are skirting the law on this. So can you tell us a little bit about your work on the cannabis industry and where you see it going and how chamber or other institutions can assist in making sure that this is an easier transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, the easiest transition is key here, right? The state has full jurisdiction over all of the regulations and enforcement. So as of right now, the city does not is not enforcing any of the illicit businesses, and the state has the only regulatory measure on any of these businesses. And so we are in the very preliminary phases of rolling out all of the social justice and like MWB applicants that got in early. They're the ones that are first rolling out. So they've gone through a very arduous, rigorous process of strict criteria showing that they can and are able and have the expertise to open up a legal adult use and medicinal use cannabis shop. Outside of that, that's why there's a slow rollout of those. Right now, this has been a priority for us locally to make sure that the folks that received the cease and desist letters or the warnings early on last year from the New York State, that the city is working directly with the sheriff's office and the state enforcement agency and making sure that those businesses are not repeat offenders or that are selling illegally, get hit with fines and get all of the product removed. And so it's going to take community partners to ensure that we are communicating out what we're hearing and what we're seeing happen in the community and how to make sure that those shops don't actually stay within our community, because we do not want shops that are illegally selling. We don't want our bodegas selling cannabis. We do want to make sure that the cannabis being sold is New York State regulated, tested, is screened, and is for use in our communities, because we want our community members to be safe. And I think right now, the state is doing a great job. I mean, we just recently had a hearing where, they're working rigorously on, putting fines out there, being able to take product out of different storefronts. They're consistently going throughout the city. One of the things I did raise in the hearing was, I asked if there was a measure that said, if you are like repeatedly getting violations, is there a line where either your license gets pulled for the tobacco you're selling, or you get put on a prohibited or banned list from ever getting a license? And right now what they said is the state doesn't have any measures like that, because they just have it. They're trying to work on reducing the illicit cannabis sales and getting the legal stores open. So it is something that we have to consistently watch. And it is something that I think over time, the city will have hopefully have more jurisdiction and more ownership of the rollout in a community. But right now it is fully state enforced.
Wow. Okay, so you have been incredible. I know that you have another appointment. I will say that we would love to have you back.
Sure.
Your the level of knowledge and your involvement in all these committees, your dedication to our small business and the well-being of your residents, your constituents, and overall the Bronx. We cannot thank you enough. For those who put in questions, I promise we will get to them, send them out to you. Councilwoman Farias' office is extremely, your team really gets back to us, answers all the questions. And I'm just sorry to see this conversation end. Do you have any parting words before I end the conversation and give some notices to our attendees?
I really just want to say thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This conversation has been great. I appreciate all the questions, and we will get answers right back to everyone. And I really hope to come back. My office is open for anyone to come by or ask any questions of us. I will drop the email and the phone number in case anyone wants to reach out on their own. But really just thank you for having me.
Well, you've been an incredible guest with a lot of topics, and we look forward to having you back. For our attendees, this is not the only coffee and conversation coming up. We have some outstanding elected officials here in the Bronx who will be joining us. Please make sure you take a look at the calendar of events. We will also be hosting a industry specific on cannabis. And we will make sure to have everybody there. Check the calendar for an April, excuse me, for an April date. These conversations will continue at the end of the day. The support and partnerships with our elected officials is what makes our businesses strong. Our residents feel comfortable within their areas with so much to address. So have a blessed day, Councilwoman and your team. Thank you so very much. To all our attendees, thank you for participating. You will hear from us. Her contact information has been put in the chat. Again, this is what we're doing, partnerships with the chamber, our business, and our amazing elected officials. Have a fabulous day, Councilwoman, and to all our attendees.
You too. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.